Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. I am a novice of 6 months experience. I have been doing mainly total body workouts, 3 sets of 5 with front squats, Romanian deadlift, weighted chin-ups, push press, and weighted dips. Are there any big changes or compound exercises I should make to have a more well-rounded program? Well, I guess here's my question. Why are you completely avoiding the big lifts? Meaning, I see you doing variations of part of the big four. Now, I don't have any problem with these lifts. I think you've selected overall pretty decent exercises, right? Those are all good exercises. Every single exercise that you lifted is a good exercise, right? Front squat, that's great. Romanian deadlift, that's good. Weighted chin-ups, push presses, weighted dips, right? They're good exercises. But they're not necessarily going to put the most muscle possible on you. I mean, we need to be realistic here. Front squats don't actually work more quad than back squats. They work about the same, but less total weight moved through the same range of motion, and not necessarily because we've done something to make the lift harder in terms of something like the way we do a box squat or whatever, where you're breaking up the eccentric concentric chain. It's because, simply put, there's a little bit less muscles involved, right? Some of the muscles of the posterior chain are less involved. We've created some unfavorable leverages in terms of keeping your torso upright. So again, if you're trying to get as big and as strong as possible, you need to be doing back squats, not just front squats. All right, Romanian deadlift, good exercise, but it can't fully replace what you could do with a heavier hip hinge off the floor, or even a deficit deadlift or a snatch grip deadlift if you're worried about the total recovery and everything for a conventional deadlift. Weighted chin-ups, great. Push presses are a good exercise for certain sports, but in terms of what they're capable of doing for your total shoulder girdle and overall strength, I don't know if they really can replace the strict press, right? And I'm not saying that they're a bad exercise. Weighted dips, can generally replace the bench press if you're proficient at them and you can do them safely. I think that's a valid replacement. But here's what I would say. These 5 exercises aren't going to be everything that you need to maximally develop size and strength. Now, you could build a good base off of them, just like you could replace 4 of those 5 with the conventional big 4, and you'd be back to my big 5, and you could build a good base off of it. But eventually, you will need to add other stuff in. If you're going to try to maximize size and strength, you will eventually need to work in more than just 5 movements. And I'm not saying you can't build a tremendous base your first year off of 5 movements, because you can, but you are going to need to eventually add more stuff in. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. What are your thoughts on stretching and injury prevention? Do you do anything to stop tightness/pain now that you're getting back into heavier weights? No. I don't really do stretching. Do I think that some stretching and mobility work when you're first getting back into training can be useful? Yeah, absolutely. If you've lost mobility due to being sedentary, yeah, there's definitely some stretches and other stuff you can do to improve those things. And all of that. But as far as actual stretching goes, no, the data doesn't even support the idea that stretching reduces injuries. Go look at some of the leading experts and coaches and other people, and it generally isn't accepted that stretching is supported by data as reducing injuries. And I'm not saying some mobility work isn't a good idea if you need some mobility, but I'm going to lean more in the direction of more active mobility. All right, you can do some band work, you can do various things, you can do things with just squatting to get yourself better at squatting. If your hips aren't mobile enough, you can do third world squats. But as far as actual stretching for injury prevention, no, the data just doesn't support it. The evidence isn't there. So I don't really do a lot of stretching. I'm doing more band work and things. I do band work. I do dynamic warm-ups a little bit with squatting and things sometimes, right? But overall, your general physical preparedness and active recovery should be handling those things, right? Like for me, right now, I do standing band crunches every day. I do hyper extensions every day. I do face pulls with bands every day. All this stuff, these prehab work and active recovery and just strengthening all these areas, in addition to training with full range of motion, is how you get most of your mobility once you're kind of out of being a total novice who might need some mobility work. Right, this is where you get it from. You don't need stretching. Stretching doesn't really seem to be beneficial in any way for injury prevention. I'm just going to call it like it is. All right, next question. Will you go back to beltless squats? Most likely at some point, sure. Most likely at some point, sure. Right now I'm doing belted training. I'm trying to maximize all my strength, neuromuscular efficiency, everything else. And so I'm doing belted training on everything that will benefit from a belt. Have I always said you need a combination of the two? Yeah, it's generally what I've done. I went through about a 2-year phase on YouTube where I didn't wear a belt at all. But historically, I have generally held the stance that most strength athletes will benefit from doing both beltless and belted training. Right? There is something to be said for doing some base building beltless. There's definitely something to be said for it, particularly beltless squats. Beltless squats, beltless pause squats can be a very valuable assistance movement. Right? They all have their place in training. But as of right now, if I'm going to get as strong as possible and I'm going to be compared to people who wear a belt, then I'm going to wear a belt. Just like Jamie Lewis was a massive proponent of beltless training. And he went and got into powerlifting. He said powerlifting is a joke. He became #2 in the world in his class beltless. But he threw on a belt and he went and broke records, right? He broke records after he threw a belt on. He decided #2 wasn't good enough. He threw on a belt, went and broke records. Belt's a valuable tool. At this time, do I have current plans to rotate in beltless work again? No, I don't. Will I probably at some point go back into a beltless phase of training? Yeah, probably so. Pretty likely that I will, because I generally tend to do that in phases. Sooner or later, I eventually feel that my core needs the adjustment. I need the change in training stimulus, and I'll eventually probably at some point go back to beltless training, right? That's normal. I've always done it that way, back and forth, but I do not currently have plans for it, nor do I have it programmed or in my current lineup for anything. All right, next question. Another Bulgarian related question. Is it okay to only deadlift once a week on Bulgarian if one is already doing very high volumes of Pendlay rows to build deadlift strength? Is this a good way to get deadlift gained, or should I just do less rows and more deadlifting? And by the way, coach, bring back the bicep shot. Bringing back the bicep shot. I don't know if I'm going to do that. I know people liked it, but my channel was much smaller back when I was doing it, and a lot of people didn't understand it. It created a lot of confusion, just like, my reloading bench created confusion, right? It created confusion. A lot of people didn't understand why I did it. It felt like it was a distraction. People thought I was trying to pretend that I was tough or something like that. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I think repping 500 pounds on the deadlift is a lot tougher than loading target ammo intended to punch paper targets. But, I digress. People didn't understand it. It was the same with the bicep shot, right? This is going to end up being a 2-for-1 question here. So we'll get to the Bulgarian in a minute. The bicep shot. What did I originally say I did it for? I did it to troll people. I did it to have fun. And to make fun of the fact that I had a previously tore bicep, that I didn't have great biceps, that it was poking fun at myself, and it was poking fun at bodybuilding, right? I had said that, but because I didn't mention that every single video, and I went months at a time without mentioning it, guess what? People thought that I was delusional and thought that I looked like an amazing bodybuilder and that I had an amazing physique, right? That was a criticism of it because people didn't understand what I was doing, because they didn't realize that I had joked about it and that it was just being done as a joke. It was poking a little bit of fun at myself, poking a little bit of fun at people who take themselves too seriously over their physiques. And it literally caused people to think that I actually thought I had an amazing physique and that I was some delusional person about it. And like with a lot of other things I do, a lot of times when I troll or do anything that's I think is funny, it can be perceived totally different on the internet than the way I intended. Because again, it's the internet, people don't get it. So I don't know if I'm gonna bring the bicep shot back. Now, as to your question about Bulgarian, tons of people do it that way. There are people who are extremely strong lifters who only deadlift once a week on Bulgarian. Now, you need to remember they're still doing some training volume. Like I've seen guys who actually do the squat and bench every single day on Bulgarian who are legitimately strong guys, who are jacked, who are lean, who end up deadlifting like once a week, but sometimes they rotate in doing like 10 singles on the deadlift. And I would say if you want to do a Bulgarian style training and you're doing a lot of upper back accessory and mid back accessory work like Pendlay rows, face pulls, all that, I think you can get away with deadlifting only once a week, because you're squatting every day. The squat and the rowing and the back work will generally build your deadlift, and one day focused on doing the deadlift is probably completely acceptable and I think quite reasonable for that. So yeah, give it a try and see how you like it before you start trying to do any sort of higher frequency deadlifting on Bulgarian, because if you're not careful, it will absolutely bury you. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.